Hello, this is another episode of me critiquing your work. You've been keeping on asking me to review your design work. I've got a few DMs, so I just thought, yeah, I can do that. Always happy to criticize someone's work. It's not that I'm enjoying to be mean or anything. You've been asking for that yourself, so I thought, why not? So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first person whose work we're gonna review is Elvin Fox. She submitted her work like a month ago, and from the beginning I can see that she's really into this goth and dark style, and I'm really impressed by it, to be honest. I really love all the compositions that she created and this illustrative approach that she's taking, like a lot of attention to small details, all these very elaborate illustrations and frames that she's using, and I can feel some sprinkles of vintage style here. Well, obviously I'm generalizing when I'm saying vintage. There are multiple vintage styles, but I'm saying that in comparison to anything modern, pretty much. What I can also say that I've noticed that she is really good in using black letter fonts, something like that, like God Loves You, which is actually a really challenging thing to do, because what I often see that designers use it in wrong context, somewhere where it's not really appropriate. I mean, that it's a very decorative font. It's really hard to read it, and designers are using it for like a very small letters which are supposed to be non-essential, and they're making it like they're drawing too much attention to themselves when it's not really appropriate. I mean, you need to make sure that you can use some illegible font. And also another problem with black letter that often occurs is the repetitiveness of the shapes of letters, because almost each letter has the same width stroke, the same sort of serifs and these little elements, and sometimes it doesn't even look like a font. It looks like just a pattern of vertical strokes. And the way she's doing it is by highlighting the first letters of each word, making them in caps, and this creates this nice contrast. And I would say that's a really good understanding of typography. But she's also good at using something more modern in terms of typography, like Eat Your Young, Come and Get Some. This is a really modern approach, but at the same time she's combining it with kind of vintage, old school style of illustration. Yeah, this is a really nice combinations of this. And also I'd like to note that I'm really fascinated by her custom typography. Like here, I guess it says Dracula. Yeah, Dracula. It's really hard to read. It's probably for people who can guess what it says, but then when you have an idea what it may say, you start recognizing the shapes of the letters. But I think in this case, it's totally fine. I'm assuming it's not an informative poster, that it's absolutely necessary to say the exact word and make it really legible. What I can say, this is the absolutely amazing work. I'm really impressed by it. And these little hand-drawn bats, I don't know if you did it yourself or you found it somewhere, but it works really well, this color scheme. So overall, I'm really enjoying looking at your works, but if I have to nitpick and find something to work on or some suggestions that I can give you to improve, possibly, I have some comments about this piece. This is a beautiful work overall, but I have some questions about this block of text. I don't really agree with the tracking here, to be honest, especially with these two lines, which are really different in terms of how close the letters are to each other. I understand that you tried to justify the text, but I don't think it's really necessary here to keep it in the exact rectangular shape, considering that it's not even the exact rectangle, because the letter F is going beyond and the bottom line is not justified. So I don't really see the necessity for sacrificing the tracking. It just creates this feeling like something is off here you don't really understand what, but the harmony is kind of disrupted. I don't know, maybe that's only my perception, but that's how I see it. I would love to see it with the same tracking of each line. Other than that, it works great. I love all the effects that you applied, and the font itself works out really great with the image and this dark gothic style. I think that looks amazing. Oh yeah, actually maybe you've taken it from somewhere, but even in that case, even if you've taken it from somewhere, I don't see why they did it in the first place. So yeah, I would consider changing the tracking here. And another thing, if we've been really nitpicking here, is these frames that are supposed to imitate the pieces of paper. To me, they are too perfectly cut. If you go in with this hand-drawn aesthetic, I would suggest you making these pieces of paper more realistic. Ideally would be just to download the actual photos of torn paper pieces, or maybe not torn, maybe they can be cut paper, but people don't cut paper with scissors that evenly. It's just, we're not robots, you know. And also then placing it exactly in parallel with one another. Obviously, yeah, you could say that it's justified, that it's your concept, but I don't see any other repetition of this anywhere in the poster, so I think it would be better if the edge was a bit less even, shall we say. Yeah, I see you tried doing it here, but that's not exactly what I mean. It's still like very evenly straight line, but what I mean is making the line itself not that straight. Yeah, just imagine if you take a piece of paper and scissors and you cut it in rectangular shape without any ruler or any additional help. It probably wouldn't look like this. So that's kind of what I mean by hand-drawn aesthetic. So that would elevate it a little bit more, this poster. But other than that, it's a beautiful work. Can't really add anything else to it. Maybe I would try to make like a stroke for these stars just to see their shape, especially the ones that are closer to the edges. I think that would make sense because now they're kind of losing their shape. What I mean by wide stroke, yeah, something like that, when you added this wide stroke around this black line or around these letters. So I would love to see that around these stars. I think that would work better. So those are just minor things to reconsider. But other than that, I'm really pleased with your designs. I would also suggest you, if you want to step a little bit further, to consider adding more colors in your designs. I know that you're already doing it and that works out beautifully, but I think it would have been even more interesting if you keep experimenting with layering and kind of recreating like letterpress effect when each color is on a different layer, is printed separately. Something like you did here when these bats, you did a little bit of this here when they are not like transparent, but you can see that you used kind of overlay effect. So they've been printed on top of the original print. And this layering of different colors, I think, works out really beautifully. And with your aesthetic, that could work really well. And adding some color is a really powerful thing that you can do to your work. And I think you have a pretty good grasp on colors, and you could experiment with that more. Yeah, but other than that, I'm really fascinated by your work in general, and keep on doing the great stuff. And thank you for your submission. And the second person we're going to be reviewing today, their work, is Pavan 1X. There are not a lot of work here, but still we can see the style of this designer and we can get a pretty good idea of what they're into. And they're doing a pretty good job, I must say. These sort of layouts are really commonly used in album art. This is really modern and I'm really enjoying looking at it, at this kind of experimental approach with very chaotic collaging different elements, and also the fact that you add in some hand-drawn touch on it works out really, really beautifully. I must say I'm really, really impressed. Especially the thing I like the most about some of your works is this hand-drawn typography elements. I'm guessing it's like a logo for these artists. I think that's a really, really good job, especially here when you applied a bunch of effects on it and this really smooth transition into everything else around it. That works out amazingly. I really, really love it because it creates this feeling when you look at it and you don't know how it's been done. That's really great for any designer. I mean, that must be the best compliment when people can't replicate your work that easily because they need to put some effort into breaking down on how you did this. Also, just in general, your experimental approach that you apply a bunch of textures. Here it's very digital and I don't even know what exactly you did to make this digital, but at the same time it has kind of volume in it. I can feel some highlights and shadows in it. So there is definitely some dimensionality. So yeah, I'm really impressed. That's the first thing I can say. And also this piece of hand-drawn typography is really, really great. I think you could do some customized maybe logos for some creative brands or like for music artists. I think that is your thing, definitely. Yeah, or just album art. And yeah, also the fact that you're going beyond this typical grid-based approach and you're pushing forward these boundaries and add a little bit of chaos, but at the same time keeping the hierarchy. By hierarchy, I mean you can still see the focal point and then your eye goes slowly from the most important element to the least. Yeah, and this is a really important thing in graphic design, to be able to set the hierarchy between the elements so they all work together. And what I can say about what I could change here in some of your designs, my suggestions, is first of all, I've noticed that for probably most of your works, you're using a very similar approach in terms of the composition, that you place everything in the center and everything revolves around the center, all the elements. And there's a lot of dead space around it, which you probably need to either activate or just crop it because it doesn't do anything. I would just crop it like this part and I would make it square size probably, because yeah, it seems like you're going for a maximalist style. You're using lots of small details, lots of elements, but they're all at the same place. So it's kind of approach like nothing or everything. So nothing around and everything is in the center. Oh, alright, that's this merge design. Okay, it works great on a t-shirt, but as a poster, not that well. So the main issue is that it just should be in a square format. So I would place it in a square mock-up or something like that, or just without a particular mock-up, I would place it on a square. And then if you want to post it on Instagram, and yeah, I know that Instagram prioritizes vertical images, then you just put it on vertical background, something like that. And also you have a similar thing here, this thing called dead space, which is something that does absolutely nothing to the layout. So you could easily crop it at least a half of this distance and you wouldn't lose anything. Yeah, but you don't have much of it in your other works. Maybe here a little bit. This space is quite empty. So maybe I would activate these highlights a little bit by making them a bit lighter, because when you look at it from afar, or you squint your eye, you would see that this part is very, very empty. It has nothing for your eye to attach. I don't know. Here, at least you have some little small details, some highlights of some sort. And here, not really. Maybe this could be something for your eye to look at, but it's too dark. So I would maybe activate this part a little bit. Also, what I can say about this work, this is also a really interesting combination of different styles. I would say very, very colorful and black and white and grunge 90s sort of style. I think the problem here is connecting these two worlds together, and just by placing these two images in between, I mean, that doesn't solve this problem. You need something stronger to connect them. And I would probably shift this borderline a little bit further to the right, because now it's really, really close to the center, and this is a really dangerous path to have this sort of divide line in the center, because what it creates is it cuts all the links between one part of the image and another one. What it does that you can just split this whole poster into two parts, and they would be as two separate artworks, but your task is to make it just one unified work. So the way how you could link it is just to repeating some elements from this side in this side and vice versa, maybe repeating some colors, some parts of the image, I don't know, even just placing these images somewhere a bit further from the center would already help. You just need to create a little bit stronger link between these two. But other than that, I think you are doing a really good job, and thank you for your submission. Okay, and the last person whose work we're gonna take a look at today is Chester Aleman. He asked me to review 4 of his works. He sent them to me in my DMs. So let's have a look at these 4 works. I don't know, let's start with this one, or maybe just the overview like I usually do. I can feel kind of the same vibe reoccurring in each of your 4 posters, which is kind of modern, a little bit Y2K approach, sometimes probably only for these 2. Very abstract and geometric shapes that you are really into. And also the thing I really like is that you're not afraid of using colors and gradients and distorted text, like somehow this time came also. I think that has a lot of creative potential, and I'm really glad that you're experimenting and you're using it. And the same thing is with these pieces of text. I think it's a really beautiful application of displacement maps. So yeah, I really like that. And this font that you've chosen for this piece, I think works out really well. So what I could say about what I could improve here. First of all, I've noticed the reoccurring of these lines that you're using for this work, this and this as well. I'm not sure what exactly I would change about it, but it gives me the vibe of these stock graphics that you can find on FreePic or Shutterstock, these vector elements that are typically used for presentations in PowerPoint. I mean, there's nothing bad about these elements, but they've been just so overused by non-designers, by people who are just using any sort of graphics just to fill in the space. So I would suggest you that you should either imitate this style and to show that you do it intentionally, or not to put that much emphasis on this element as if it's the main object in the composition. I would probably add some other graphics, and I would keep it as like additional detail, but I wouldn't put the main emphasis unless you want to manipulate it somehow. Maybe applying some displacement maps to it, that would be a lot more interesting, because now it looks very geometric and very vector graphics that you can find on FreePic. I hope you see what I mean. Even here it's applied better because it's in a lot more subtle way. You blurred it and now it's not that noticeable, and it works out actually quite well here, especially considering that you distorted the title. Yeah, I think it's a really nice use of it here. Maybe I would also play with the highlights and shadows, and I would add some dimensionality to it. That's just an idea of what you can do to push it even further. Also, speaking of this piece, I'm not really happy with the way you cropped the text, because you just devaluated the meaning of it. It seems like it's completely non-essential and nobody needs to know what it says, so you can just easily crop it. I don't think that's a good way of treating the text in this case, considering that there are not many text blocks around. So I would keep it all inside of the page, and also I would either add more text, this small size, or less, because right now the size of this rectangle is very similar to the size of the title, and something has to be bigger. Right now it's too repetitive that you're using the exact same size. For this element, if we combine it all in one text block and this, so yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Something like here, like you have body text, but it takes more space than the title, but the title is still really noticeable and visible because of its font and because it's much bigger. Also, I'm not really sure you should justify the text because it creates this really awkward big gaps between the words, and you don't really have any specific reason for it. It just creates this sense of that something is off and like the balance is not there. So yeah, I wouldn't justify it to both sides. My point is you need to try to get rid of these big gaps between the words. Okay, and in terms of this piece, this is a really interesting piece in terms of the experimental approach. I like the fact that you used gradient maps here and different colors. That creates a lot of visual interest to it, but you need to find the way how to unite these elements together. In terms of hierarchy, actually it works because you use different point sizes and the face of the lady is very noticeable, and you can see that this is the focal point. But what I mean is I would try to unify all the elements by the color. Maybe I would apply another gradient map on top of everything. So maybe the white elements would have a little hue of yellow, and that would align with other yellow elements, so they would have something in common, for example. Or you can just use one color on top and try to play with different layer modes. So you need some sort of an element or a color scheme to bring everything together in that sense. Also, you're doing a very similar thing with this text when you just sort of cropping it when it's disappearing in the darkness. You're just devaluating what this text is saying, and it creates the feeling like this text doesn't even need to be here. Like you put it just for no reason and you don't need to read it, like as if you're saying it to a viewer. And I would prefer it to be visible fully and at least somewhat legible, because when you crop such big parts of the text, it's not legible at all. I mean, it's legible in other parts, but you can't say what it's meant to be here. So yeah. So those were my thoughts. Also, another thing I forgot to mention is that you mixed the outlined typography with the regular type that is filled with color. I'm not happy with the way you mixed it because it looks very repetitive to me. So I would prefer two lines to be filled together. For example, if you would do away from or spent away with full color and everything else around it with a stroke around it. Because now you can't even pinpoint what is the main word of this title or two words of the title. It seems more like a pattern when it's repeated in the same way, if you know what I'm saying. And again, I'm not sure you need to justify the text this way. Maybe here I would understand it a little bit more because this whole layout seems very geometric, and maybe that's why you want to keep a very organized geometric shape. But you don't have any other rectangles here other than rectangles in your typography. But I think you would be okay with aligning it to the left side because this text is aligned to the right side, so that would be okay. Or also you could try to align this text to the left side as well, but then it would be a bit challenging to unite it with these lines element because now they work together more or less. So yeah, maybe you should align it just to the left side. Probably that's the thing that I would suggest. And yeah, and just a general advice, I would try to play around with gradient maps even more. Maybe applying it again to this layout and this layout, to all of them, and try to experiment with more levels of different colors. That always brings some unexpected, really interesting results. Yeah. But you're still doing a really good job, and thank you for your submission. So those were my thoughts on the designs that people sent to me. Let me know, guys, in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree with me or what you would add to this. And if you want to be featured in one of my next episodes of this series, please send me a DM on Instagram and I'll do that. Why not? Also, if you guys interested in learning poster design and all my coolest Photoshop techniques and tricks, check out my poster design course, which is upcoming in about a month and a half. The enrollment will be limited time, so don't miss out. Right now the enrollment is closed. You can only join the waiting list, but just keep an eye on it and you can just have a look what it includes. So yeah, and if you have any other ideas for the future videos, also leave them down below. And thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!